asking all of you what comes to mind when you think about the strategic plan. You don't have to answer that. But if you're like most people, you're probably thinking about things like the mission, vision, values, and goals of the institution. And while those are undoubtedly essential foundational components to any strategic plan, what they don't do is allow us to drive change or inform strategy or claim success. And so institutional metrics provide a means for measuring the success of the strategic plan and also allowing us to focus on the things that matter most, especially when it comes to making budget and planning decisions for the institution. So all of that is to say that, it's to kind of lead us up to the discussion about the college scorecards and the development process that we've been going through. So a scorecard is a tool that allows us to report on the metrics for the institution in an organized way so that college stakeholders like yourselves can monitor institutional progress and performance as well as institutional effectiveness. The scorecards themselves link the strategies under the strategic plan to measurable outcomes. So you may have heard that what gets measured gets managed. And so this is the means by which we are ensuring that the activities and initiatives that are taking place under the plan are affecting meaningful change and are resulting in positive and meaningful outcomes for the institution. The scorecards themselves, in addition to the metrics that are include data points that will provide information about the current as well as target states, any trend information or historical trends that we've seen over time. They'll allow us to monitor progress over time from the start of the plan over the next 5 years. And they'll also allow us to drill down into more detailed information to be able to explore the data in more detail to identify themes or trends or areas of strength or those that may need more attention and more resources allocated to them. So as you all know, the current strategic plan is organized around the 6 strategic pillars, and then within each of those pillars we have 5 strategies that drive the work under the strategic plan. I'm calling your attention to this because this provides the framework for the strategic scorecards that we've shared with you today. And I should mention that the scorecards at this point are still working documents. They're still subject to modification and change. But you'll see that there are 6 scorecards that are aligned with each of the pillars in the plan, and that within the scorecards, they're broken down by each of the strategies under the pillar. So the college leadership team, in collaboration with the Institutional Research Office, spent a substantial amount of time walking through and identifying what we felt were the most appropriate metrics to align with the strategies under each of these pillars, so that we would be confident that we were measuring the work that's taking place under each of these pillars in the most effective way. In order to guide the selection of the metrics for each of the pillars, we grounded our discussions around the 6 guiding principles that you see here. As you can imagine, there are many, many different metrics that we could have selected, and so the guiding principles helped us to narrow down and really focus on the types of metrics that are most critical and most important. And so they also help to explain why some things might show up in the scorecards and why some things might have been left out. We acknowledge that the metrics that you see in there today may not be the most appropriate metrics, and so we are going through an input process with the college community right now, so that those outside of the college leadership team and the Institutional Research Office have an opportunity to provide feedback and make recommendations about metrics in case anything else needs to be considered and make it into that final document or the final scorecards that you'll see and it's great.
I have a couple. For referencing page 3 as our example, did you say, Derek?
Yes.
So just curious. So I'm just going to take a look at the experiential learning, the very first point. We don't need to go through it, but you list a current figure. Is that last year's data? And there's also a trend on the far side. Is that a 5-year composite? What is that?
So right now what you'll see is the most recent data point we have available, and it might vary based on the source and where the information is coming from. The trend data is showing the trend from the prior year. So right now it's only a comparison from last year to this year, and that could change as we bring more data and information into the metric or into the scorecard. So they are, again, we're in the process of compiling all of the historic trend data and information to help inform those types of elements going forward.
Is it safe to assume that you're looking at trend data backwards as well, like 3 to 5 years past, 10 years past, as you're compiling the
Right,
information?
so sort of behind the scenes of each of these scorecards that you're looking at, there's going to be the opportunity to look at those trends over a longer period of time. So 5 years, 10 years, however many years that we have the information for. So there's some metrics that we are just starting to gather, and there's others that we have, all the way back to college in some cases. So we'll narrow it. As appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah, she'll go through that a little bit.
So the data sources, so the data that are in the scorecards are centered around the sources that you see up here on the screen. And so you'll notice right off the bat that a lot of these should be familiar to you, and that a lot of them are external to the college. And so these are really sticking with that initial guideline around benchmarking and having the opportunity or the ability to target our performance and to monitor our performance against peers locally and nationally. And to aspire to a level of the best practice institutions and organizations around the country. And so in most cases, we've tried to align ourselves with those external sources, but obviously there are some cases where there is no external source available for the data and information that we need that aligns with a particular strategy. And so, of course, we're also using our own internal data and processes as information that will go into the metrics. The scorecard structure here, so if I can call your attention to the handout that you all have in front of you, you'll notice that all of the scorecards have the same basic structure and components to them. And so, as I've indicated previously, they align with the pillar itself. And then the strategies running down that left-hand column there are directly tied to the strategies within the plan that align with that pillar. We've outlined metrics. In some cases, several metrics align to the same strategy. And so you'll notice some variation in that. We've indicated the source for where we expect that information to come from, as well as the current figure, which I've explained is the most recent that we have available at this point. We haven't input any targets. We'll talk about the target setting process and philosophy here in a minute. But the scorecards themselves will allow us, again, to monitor the gap or the difference between that current state and the target state, as well as progress over time, and then the trends that we'll be able to monitor. And when these become live, we'll be able to click and drill down into the longer historic trends, as well as the disaggregations, wherever they may be relevant, so that we can look at the data broken down by things like gender, ethnicity, full-time, part-time status, those types of things. So I know that this is very difficult to read. And I also know that we don't have time, as Derek mentioned, to dig into all 109 metrics. So we just want to call your attention to one concrete example about how the scorecards themselves align with the college, the work that the college is doing under the strategic plan. And so this is just a closer look at that teaching and learning excellence scorecard from page 3 of your handout. And so I've called out a couple of the strategies in particular. And if we can focus on something like professional development, you'll notice that aligns really closely with the budget priorities that are being discussed and with a lot of the things that we'll see coming forward in terms of activities and things in need of resources for fiscal 21. And so there's that direct alignment between what we see here and the types of things that will be coming forward in those planning and budgeting processes. The next step in the process, as we're collecting input on the metrics themselves, we're also collecting input on the target setting philosophy for the institution. So we've proposed a sort of foundational philosophy to react to or to respond to, and targets themselves represent the desired level of performance that the college aspires to reach at the end of the 5-year process. And so what we're suggesting is that those targets should be challenging but realistic, and first and foremost they should be aspirational targets, so that they should challenge us to do better and to reach the highest level that we possibly can. And they should also be constructive, so they should provide insight into opportunities for improvement and not be used punitively or as a marker to indicate where failure has occurred. Any progress toward the target is ultimately a success, but we want to be able to use those targets to drive and inform change in a constructive way. In terms of the target setting methods, we've established somewhat of a hierarchy So when we're looking at the current figures and we're trying to develop the targets themselves, we'll start off by looking at whether there are any state and national targets that we might need to tie ourselves to. So the 60 by 25 is a good example there, where we would need to tie in our graduation rate, for example, to some of the larger metrics that exist outside of CLC. If none are available, we would be looking to meet or surpass the top performing institutions. So in a lot of the sources that I showed you, we have external data where they will identify honor roll institutions or top performing schools, and we can set our targets based on that level of performance. In some cases, there may be metrics within the plan that should be aligned with one another. So whenever there are student milestone metrics, perhaps, those should be aligned to outcome metrics. So the retention rate target might need to be linked with the graduation rate target. And so we'll see some cases where that will be the primary method that we use to establish those targets. And then finally, if none of those other methods can be used, then we'll be looking to work with internal stakeholders and relying on our own data trends and looking toward our internal expertise to establish targets that we feel are aspirational but also realistic. So as a concrete example, again, drawing your attention back to the professional development item from Scorecard 3, there's a metric on there related to the rating of professional development capacity from the ICAT survey. Again, making a plug for ICAT. If you haven't heard it enough already. So obviously we don't have a current figure here yet because the ICAT is still in progress, and so once we get the data there, we'll be able to plug in that current figure. And this is a case where when we're thinking about how to set or at what level we should set that target over the 5-year period, we would be looking to meet or surpass top performers, again looking at some of the ATD institutions and other schools that are considered high performers based on their responses and their institutions' data from the ICAT survey. So what we are asking for today or looking for is the board's endorsement of the target setting philosophy that we've outlined and the methods that we're recommending so that we can go forward into the next step as we continue to populate the metrics and the data points for each of the scorecards, that we can begin setting those targets to be prepared to bring back those final scorecards for your review in next semester.
Okay. Comments, questions? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so supporting the college's target setting philosophy and methods, I want to relate that back to page 3 on one of your examples, the professional development that you just highlighted. The question, percent of faculty satisfied with professional development opportunities, great colleges to work for, 87%. Of course I love that, but I'm also a little bit suspicious of it. I would hope to see 87% after some kind of intervention, and I'm happy that we have a happy staff, believe me. I think they're fabulous, but I guess in order for me to say yes, I support the philosophy and methods, I need to understand a little bit like how robust is that number? Was that as staff and faculty reported out on ICAT this year? So it's the one metric, essentially?
So that was it. So it was from the
Okay,
Great
one
Colleges
question.
Workforce Survey that we conducted in spring of 17.
Okay.
And that was the first time we had administered that survey. We'll be looking to administer again this spring, so we'll have a better point of comparison to be able to establish the target going forward.
You know, and I would offer that specifically to this example, typically in every scorecard, there's multiple input voices to this. So all of the CESI is a tool that is student voice. So every item here that has CESI are directly, those are student voice, and it gives us a comparison against national benchmarks. And the professional development that we'll be delivering will be driving specifically into those areas. And so the measurement is based on what students are experiencing from the classroom, not a self-rating.
Awesome.
So there's an important balance, I think, to ensure that we're using faculty voice and student voice to inform the work that we're trying to do. So we're trying to balance that throughout the process as well.
Great. Is the goal here to get all of these in the trend column so that they're trending up and not down?
Well, right now the trend column
Doesn't mean anything?
it doesn't mean anything. It's just there to show you we will
Okay.
be tracking. Yeah,
I
there's
see.
no
I got a
work at
question.
hand yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot to track there.
I was,
Huh?
Well, I am going to remind the board
Where's Derek's
that
track?
I asked
We
during
track
my interview process with the board, what's your goal? And what's the big, hairy, audacious goal,
Right.
the BHAG? And the answer was, we want CLC to become an Aspen Prize College. I realize this feels arduous to some people, but being really explicit about your strategic plan blueprint and measuring yourself along the way, driven by student success outcomes, is how you get there. If we're not doing this, we have no chance of getting there. So I'm just bringing us back to, here's why we're moving in this direction.
Okay.
so you kind of took the words out of my mouth, because I'm wondering, does Aspen have any data points?
This is all
This
part of
is
the Aspen
all part of
process.
Aspen, okay.
Yeah, if we weren't doing any of this, we have no chance of ever even being invited to that.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You know, I talked about this at the last board meeting, and there's, 6 pillars. So I look at the one, access, and I think about all the things that make it difficult for students to access an education. And it doesn't seem like this is what I would say a typical educator would put together, all academic, everything. There's nothing here that talks about what are your difficulties in getting to class.
Oh.
What is it? Why is it hard to get to class? Why will you be late to class sometimes? And why can't you take a test when we schedule it? When I'm out in the community and people are talking to me about, that they go to college in Lake County, I always ask those kind of questions. And I'm surprised that we still haven't gotten to that point.
Well, I would offer, Rich, that those are included in here as we build out the Lands for Success framework, because I think that's a really important point. But building a holistic student support structure is, in fact, our intervention with students and having those conversations with them. But understanding their whys, they can't do those things, helps inform us about how we have to redesign our system so that they can access and they can complete. So it is about using student voice, but these access and success momentum metrics, it's not academic. There's proven research that students who can complete a minimum of 1 full-time semester are more likely to complete their degree than those who don't. 70% of our students are part-time. So this will help us see how many students are able to complete a certain number of credits in a semester, but it's about us changing our system so they can access it. If we continue to just hope they all quit their jobs and come to school full time, we're never going to address
Right.
their access issues. So please know, there's a whole lot of that kind of conversation that'll drive our work.
This past summer there was a very informative and really hitting home advertisement for University of Phoenix, where the poor woman is working hard, had to stay late at work. She gets too late to her class, the door is locked. That happened to me here at CLC a couple times, working late at Abbott Laboratories and coming here late, and the teacher's looking at his watch like, I control this classroom and you're not here on time. It happened to me at Northeastern also, going past an accident scene on driving from Abbott Laboratories to Chicago while I was getting my bachelor's degree. That kind of stuff has got to start hitting home, that we're not going to do that kind of stuff. We're going to support our students and help them along and get them to the place they want to go to.
I 100% agree. That's equity work right there. Is evaluating the rules and policies that we have and think about who's it written for, and who's it negatively impacting. A working parent who might have a child with the flu.
Right.
We have to have some flexibility in that. So that is the equity work that we'll be doing.
Right.
Yeah. So remember that when I'm asking for professional development.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Megan, since we're on page 3, I'm just looking at some things here. So all of these current figures, we have that data already, right? So percentage of courses with integrated learning management system, we don't know what that is. The last item, does that mean that Blackboards or courses on Blackboard, we don't know what that number is? I'm just curious.
So we don't have access to it currently through the institutional research office, so we're working with other areas around the college. So for some of the internal data points especially, we're still in the process of pulling them out.
Oh, okay, just haven't yet.
Yeah.
Since I had some cooperative experience and field experience things going on with our group today, that number is 11.6. Yeah, I would see that's a lot of area to grow, right? Would you agree?
Which number?
I'm looking at the second number. Percentage of students are currently in internships, field experience, co-op experience, or clinical.
Well, look at the one above it, it's even lower.
Yeah, I see that, you're right.
That's what pipelines, that's why we're gonna be creating pipelines to fix that number.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good feedback, thank you very much. It's helpful to kind of know where you're going.
It's exciting, as a framework, easy to read, easy to benchmark, it's nice.
I'll just wrap up. You have a summary in front of you. We've reminded you about completing the ICAT survey multiple times. We want the board to be a part of this process. You have a summary of the past month's student and educational affairs updates about great work of our students, staff, and faculty, and you have a list of the Board of Trustees meetings and events through May of 2020. And thank you very much for your input, and that concludes my report.
Okay.
Did you have a time frame on that culinary manual for December 6th?
5:30 to 7.
Okay.
Yes.
How about the Day of the Dead festivities?
5:30 to 7.
Oh, they're both at the same time.